It began as any other evening in the presidential palace of Burkina Faso. The grand dining hall glowed warmly under the soft golden light of chandeliers, the polished wood table laid with traditional Burkinabe dishes, cutlery gleaming beside glasses filled with fresh water and bissap. President Ibrahim Traoré, wearing his characteristic military fatigues with a red beret resting on the chair beside him, sat at the head of the table surrounded by his closest advisors. His expression was one of calm confidence as he listened to the updates from his ministers. The atmosphere was light, almost celebratory. After all, the government had just completed its 31st national infrastructure project in under a year. "We have the opening of the water project in the northern region this week," said Economy Minister Caleb, flipping through his neat binder of progress notes. "The villagers are waiting for your arrival, Mr. President. They've already begun preparing." Traoré nodded, his tone thoughtful but proud. "This will be the 32nd of the 50 development promises we made. One by one we are delivering." He reached for his fork, scooping up a bite of grilled chicken and seasoned rice, a dish from his native Gawa region, prepared specially by the palace chef. But as he brought the food to his mouth and chewed slowly, something changed. In seconds, the president's expression faltered. His lips trembled slightly. His eyes darted subtly, first left then right. The warmth of his usual composure vanished. He coughed once, then again. A deeper cough, sharp and involuntary. His throat burned. The pain was unnatural. A heavy pressure bloomed in his chest. His heart began to race. Then, a strange warmth radiated from his stomach and rose like fire up his neck. His vision began to blur, and a loud ringing overwhelmed his ears. "Mr. President?" asked Interior Minister Kaber. His voice tinged with concern. "Are you all right?" But Traoré couldn't respond. He reached for his glass, but his hand trembled uncontrollably. The crystal tipped over. Water spilled across his chest. The fork clanged to the marble floor. The room froze. "The president is in trouble," shouted Kaber, standing so fast that his chair crashed backward. Within moments, the calm dinner became an emergency scene. Guards stormed in, ministers shouted, the palace physician was summoned. Traoré slumped in his chair, gasping, sweat pouring down his face. "Seal the palace," barked Security Chief Wedrigo into his radio. "No one enters. No one leaves. We may be dealing with a direct assassination attempt." Captain Yura rushed to the president's side, crouching down. "Hold on, Mr. President. We've got you. Help is on the way." But even Yura's voice trembled with fear. The palace medical team arrived within minutes. Dr. Zongo, a calm and seasoned physician trained in war zones, quickly examined Traoré's pupils and took his pulse. "This is chemical poisoning," he announced gravely. "Judging by the speed, it's a rare nerve agent, possibly synthetic. We need to move him now." Stretcher bearers rushed in. The president was barely conscious as he was whisked out of the dining hall, down the corridor, and into the armored ambulance bound for the Central Military Hospital's high-security medical wing. The last thing he heard before losing consciousness was Zongo's strained voice. "The poison is spreading fast. We're running out of time." Scene 2. A nation on the edge. That night, all of Burkina Faso held its breath. Crowds began gathering outside the hospital, some crying, some praying, others shouting in protest. "This is France's doing," one group chanted. "He defied their control, they want him gone." "No," shouted another. "There are traitors in the palace. Snakes that eat at the same table." The hospital was turned into a fortress. Tanks blocked the roads. Armed commandos stood at every entrance. In the presidential wing, under the white glare of surgical lights, President Traoré lay unconscious, breathing only with the help of machines. Outside the ICU, the inner circle gathered in a tense huddle. Interior Minister Kaber, Security Chief Wedrigo, and Prime Minister Dio. "What's the current status?" Dio asked quietly, his face pale. Dr. Zongo emerged with blood tests in hand. Critical but stable for now. The poison is synthetic. Lab analysis is ongoing. This was no accident. And no ordinary assassin. This is an inside job, said Wedrigo darkly. Someone within our ranks. The food, the drink. All came from the palace kitchen. Everyone who touched it must be questioned. We must tread carefully, warned Dio. One wrong move and the country falls into chaos. But we must also move quickly, said Kaber. From chefs to bodyguards, no one is above suspicion. Not even us. The room fell silent. All three men exchanged looks. Loyalty had become a question mark. Paranoia loomed large. Who can we trust to investigate this? Asked Dio. The National Police. Intelligence. Military police. No, said Wedrigo. They're all compromised to some extent. We need someone outside the system. Someone with no ties and no loyalties. There was only one name that came to mind. Scene 3, the ghost from the past. In a modest single-story home on the edge of Ouagadougou, a man sat listening to the radio. Maurice Sankara, former intelligence chief of Burkina Faso, now 63, gray-bearded, worn but sharp-eyed. His years in the intelligence world had given him a sixth sense. Something was wrong. It is confirmed that President Ibrahim Traoré has been poisoned, the broadcaster said. He remains in critical condition. Sankara turned off the radio, a long breath escaping him. Just 3 years earlier, Traoré had accused him of collaborating with French operatives. He had been stripped of his position, tried in a military court, and placed under indefinite house arrest. The sentence had later been reduced, but not forgiven. The ringing of his dusty landline phone pierced the silence. He picked it up. Maurice, said a calm voice. They're going to call you. Be ready. Who? Sankara asked, confused. The palace. They don't trust anyone else. Sankara chuckled dryly, half in disbelief. They must be desperate. The man who exiled me is now reaching out. The voice paused. This is bigger than pride, Maurice. The country is cracking, and you're the only one who can see in the dark. Sankara leaned back in his chair, staring into the shadows of his living room. I guess the past never really stays buried, he muttered. Then he stood, walked to his coat rack, and picked up a worn leather folder, marked in faded ink. Operation Phoenix. He was ready. The air around the Central Military Hospital of Ouagadougou was thick with tension and fear. President Ibrahim Traoré lay unconscious inside a sterile high-security room. His chest rose and fell mechanically, aided by machines, as tubes ran from his arms to 4 drips delivering what little the doctors could do to counteract the mysterious chemical poisoning. But outside the walls of the medical ward, a different kind of war was unfolding, one of suspicion, secrecy, and power. Chaos in the corridors. Security Chief Commander Wedrigo paced with sharp, calculated steps. No leaks. No mistakes. Every palace staff member is to be quarantined and interrogated one by one, he told his assistant. If this poison came from inside, we need to find the snake before it strikes again. Prime Minister Colonel Dio stood motionless near the reinforced hospital doors. His eyes were fixed on the screen above the entrance, which showed the president's vital signs. We must be careful, he finally said. If word gets out that we are tearing ourselves apart, we play directly into the enemy's hands. Interior Minister Kaber was not as calm. Someone fed the president a rare neurotoxin. Do you understand how sophisticated this is? This isn't the work of a random traitor. This is an intelligence operation. But whose intelligence? Asked Dio quietly. Kaber didn't answer. The suspect list grows. In a secure office at the Ministry of Internal Affairs, a multi-agency task force had already started compiling a list of every individual who had been near the president in the last 24 hours. Chefs, servers, guards, and even close ministers. The lead investigator, Major Nadine Yarrow, reviewed the early reports. We found no foreign agents infiltrating the palace, she said. No evidence of a break-in. The cameras didn't catch anything unusual. But someone tampered with the food, said her deputy. We need to question the kitchen staff again. And then a breakthrough. A single trace of a rare poison compound, synthetic military grade, engineered to mimic a heart attack and vanish from the body within hours. It was called venin noir, black venom. Only a few intelligence services in the world had access to it. The return of the exile. Meanwhile, in a modest, sunlit house on the outskirts of Ouagadougou, a man in his 60s was watering his garden when the knock came. Maurice Sankara turned, eyes sharp despite his age. The two military officers at his gate wore no insignias. They weren't here for small talk. Mr. Sankara, one of them said. We're under orders to escort you to the palace. You've been reinstated. Temporarily. Sankara's eyes narrowed. Temporarily. Or sacrificially. Neither officer responded. But Sankara understood. He walked inside, changed into a worn military jacket with a faded emblem of Burkina Faso's intelligence service, and picked up a small notebook. As he stepped into the waiting vehicle, he knew this wasn't just about finding a poisoner. It was about revisiting ghosts, including the president himself. A history of mistrust. 3 years earlier, Ibrahim Traoré had publicly accused Maurice Sankara of collaborating with the French intelligence network in destabilizing West African governments. Though no evidence had ever been presented, Traoré had made an example of him, stripping him of power, freezing his assets, and placing him under house arrest. But now that same administration was begging for his help. Inside the palace's situation room, Prime Minister Dio, Commander Ouedraogo, and Minister Kaber waited anxiously as Sankara entered. He offered no salutes. He simply looked at them and said, I assume you called me because the enemy knows how to hide. And because you don't trust each other. No one spoke. Sankara sat down. Then let me be blunt. You're dealing with someone who didn't just want Traoré dead. They wanted it done cleanly, with deniability and internal confusion. This poison isn't just chemical, it's political. The first lead. Sankara's first act was to personally inspect the president's last meal. The plates had been cleared, but the utensils were in evidence bags. Traces of the poison were found not on the food, but on the rim of the water glass. That meant the poison wasn't cooked in. It had been applied, most likely after the food was served. So it wasn't the kitchen staff, Sankara said. It was someone with access to the dining table after the meal had begun. Then came a startling revelation. Of the 6 staff members who served the meal, one was a last-minute replacement. A steward named Jean-Baptiste Guamin. Where is he now? Sankara asked. The room fell silent. He never clocked out, said Commander Ouedraogo. And his file just disappeared from our database. Sankara stood slowly. Then we're not just dealing with betrayal. We're dealing with a ghost. Someone planted, protected, and removed as soon as the mission was complete. A conspiracy unfolds. Later that night, in a private meeting, Sankara addressed the 3 senior officials. There are only 2 possible conclusions, he said. Either this is the work of a foreign power, France, or one of its private proxies, or someone here is playing both sides. A traitor hiding among the loyal. Dio, his voice low, asked, Are you saying one of us might be involved? I'm saying the poisoner had inside help. And I intend to find out who it was. As he left the room, Sankara's mind drifted to the final piece of evidence he hadn't yet shared. A tiny surveillance image, recovered from a hidden hallway camera. It showed Jean-Baptiste Guamin entering a secured wing of the palace the morning of the attack, escorted by someone known to all 3 men in that room. But Sankara needed time. And he needed to be sure. Because the next step wouldn't just expose a poisoner. It would shake the foundations of Burkina Faso's leadership, and its future. The corridors of power in Burkina Faso had never felt so cold. While President Ibrahim Traoré remained unconscious, fighting for his life in a guarded hospital room, a different kind of war raged in silence, one of shadows, secrets, and betrayal. Former intelligence chief Maurice Sankara sat alone in a dimly lit room in the basement of the palace, reviewing surveillance footage on a secure terminal. A flickering video file paused on a frame showing the now-missing steward Jean-Baptiste Guamin, not entering the kitchen, not entering the guest quarters, but stepping into a restricted military access corridor, led by a figure in uniform. A captain in the Republican Guard. Beneath the uniform, Sankara whispered to himself, his finger tapping the paused screen. That's where the poison hides. Buried loyalties. At 3:27 a.m., Sankara summoned Prime Minister Dio, Security Chief Ouedraogo, and Interior Minister Kaber to the palace intelligence chamber. None of them had slept. Sankara didn't waste time. I have reason to believe the attempt on the president's life was facilitated by someone in the elite Republican Guard. He began, voice measured but cold. The poisoner, Jean-Baptiste Guamin, was escorted into a secure corridor by Captain Bateau Cohn, an officer personally assigned to the president's security detail. Kaber's jaw tensed. Captain Cohn. He's one of our most trusted guards. Exactly, said Sankara. And that's what makes him the perfect asset. A long silence followed. Has he been located? Asked Dio. Sankara nodded. He's still on duty, assigned to the southern gate. He doesn't know we have the footage. I recommend we arrest him quietly, without alerting others. Agreed, said Ouedraogo. If word gets out, we may trigger panic or alert his handlers. The interrogation. At 4:15 a.m., Captain Cohn was quietly summoned under the pretense of a security update. In a fortified underground holding room, he found Sankara waiting, alone. Captain Cohn stood rigid. Is there a reason I was brought here, sir? Sankara didn't look up from the file in his hands. Tell me about Jean-Baptiste Guamin. Cohn blinked then frowned. I don't know who that is. Sankara smiled slightly, then pressed a button. The screen behind him flickered to life, showing the video of Cohn leading Guamin down the restricted corridor. You should know, Captain, Sankara said softly. I've interrogated over 200 enemy agents in my life. Most cracked after 3 hours. You will crack sooner. Cohn remained silent, but sweat began to form on his forehead. What did you give him access to? Sankara asked. Did he plant the poison himself, or were you just the facilitator? Still silence. Sankara leaned forward. Who paid you, Captain? Who owns your loyalty? Cohn finally spoke, quietly. You think you're winning. But it's already too late. Sankara froze. That wasn't just a confession. That was a warning. Second threat. An emergency alert chimed on the palace's private intelligence network. A second incident had just occurred. 2 soldiers at the military hospital's eastern checkpoint were found unconscious, their weapons missing. Surveillance footage showed a man in nurse's uniform bypassing the biometric scanner using a stolen keycard. Code Red was triggered. Alarms rang. Hospital corridors went into lockdown. Sankara, watching the live feed, realized what was happening. They're not done. They're trying to finish the job. The hospital siege. Commander Ouedraogo and his elite response unit scrambled to the hospital. The rogue nurse had barricaded himself inside President Traoré's ward, having overpowered 2 guards and shot 1 nurse. The hospital's external power was cut. In the darkened corridor outside the room, soldiers stood with guns drawn. Dr. Zongo, trembling, whispered, "If he administers a second compound, the president won't survive." Sankara arrived, placed a calming hand on Ouedraogo's shoulder, and surveyed the scene. "No explosives," he said. "This isn't an attack. This is a cleanup mission. Someone sent him to make sure Traoré doesn't wake up." The silent savior. Time was running out. The intruder had locked the door, moved past life support monitors, and was now prepping a syringe. The president, motionless, was still intubated. But the intruder never expected Corporal Asita Coanda, a young female medic stationed in the adjacent supply closet, to have remained behind during the chaos. As the intruder focused on the syringe, Corporal Coanda silently emerged, grabbed a metal tray, and struck him hard across the temple. The man dropped instantly. Within seconds, soldiers flooded the room. The attacker was restrained. The syringe was seized, later confirmed to be a neurotoxin stronger than the first. Sankara entered and saw the unconscious attacker. "Tell the guards not to speak to him," he said coldly. "He talks only to me." The web expands. Back at the palace, Sankara briefed Dio and Kaber. There were 2 attempts on the president's life. One through poison, one through assassination. Both within 24 hours. That's not desperation. That's a strategy. Kaber looked shaken. Someone wants to end Traoré's presidency permanently. But why now? Sankara opened a classified dossier. Because the president was days away from announcing a complete cutoff of French financial contracts. Mining. Infrastructure. Dio's eyes widened. He was going to nationalize the mineral reserves. Exactly, Sankara said. And someone in this palace told them. Someone with access to the agenda. Final move. By the end of day 2, Traoré was still unconscious, but stabilizing. The hospital wing had been reinforced with biometric locks. The palace was under martial lockdown. The interrogations continued. Captain Cohn remained silent. The second assassin had no identification, no records, no known fingerprints. And yet, both had one thing in common. They carried a small black coin, stamped with an insignia long thought dissolved, a wolf's head encircled by 13 stars. Sankara stared at the coin. It was the insignia of a secret network of mercenaries and intelligence operatives, known in whispers as La Meute. The Wolf Pack, a covert network used by former colonial powers to manipulate African regimes from the shadows. And now, it seemed, they had infiltrated the highest levels of Burkina Faso.